Hello and welcome back to Curiosity Mine. In this video we're going to talk about something that we've seen many times on this channel but we've never really spoken about, and it's this little shack in Marilla Street, Lightning Ridge, which has stood here since the 1930s, and it's both the home of and one of the most significant items in the collection of the Lightning Ridge Historical Society. The cottage is known as the Graham Brothers Cottage, but it was actually built earlier by the Spicer family.
So welcome to the Graham Brothers Cottage. The Graham Brothers bought this cottage in 1937 from Albert Spicer and his family, who did build it in 1932. Albert Spicer was a man on the land up around Hungerford, and he married a girl from Burke, whose cousins were mining here at Lightning Ridge back in, golly, as early as 1915. And he sort of fell in love with the place. So when he married, he came across to go mining in 1930, but his wife didn't come for a couple of years. He struck it big and chose to build this decent house.
Albert's son Mal regularly visits the historical cottage to reconnect with his family's history.
So Mal Spicer lives down in Parks, but comes to visit the Graham cottage, and he has many stories to tell about his father striking it rich here, and he's only 95 this year. He points out an electric insulator that he hung in the tree that Dad planted. And of course today it's way up the top with the parrots that nest in our big hollow tree at the back. So this is the tree that our little boy Mal Spicer, actually it's not an electric insulator, it's the top of a flagon, but you can see it, and he would have as a little boy reached it. And this is in 90 years.
Albert Spicer also has his name on one of the oldest and most historically significant opal fields at Lightning Ridge.
And his mining partner was Laurie Hart, another Englishman, a bachelor, who often came to visit them in the 40s. He continued mining here at Lightning Ridge. Harts and Spicers is an old opal field out on the run of the 3 Mile Ridge.
In 1937, the cottage changed hands from the Spicer family to the Graham brothers, Sid and George.
We never did agree in our lives. It's a funny thing, but that is a fact. Two brothers living together for practically a lifetime, it takes a bit of doing. We survived it so far, and neither of us have murdered yet, but we've been lucky, both of us.
Now the Graham brothers were interesting men. They left the South Island of New Zealand in 1919, the year of the influenza. It is said they escaped the influenza. They were grave diggers. They lived at the cemetery. And I just wonder how they would have come across from South Island to Tasmania. And they actually found the osmiridium deposits in, I believe it was southeastern Tasmania.
Osmiridium, if you're curious, is an alloy of osmium and iridium, and it's often found associated with platinum. Given its association with platinum, it's obviously quite a lucrative metal, and one of its uses is to make durable nibs for fountain pens, as osmiridium is a very hard alloy.
And they sold their interest in the osmiridium to one of the big companies, and that was their nest egg to come to the mainland. And they were in Coober Pedy very early. I mean, Coober Pedy opal was found like in 1915, and I believe they were over there already in the 20s. They came up to Angledool, where they were mining earlier than Lightning Ridge, but they didn't choose this house until 1937 and decided to spend the rest of their years here. Now, Sid was older than George. They seemed to be joined at the hip, bachelor brothers. They were diminutive men. And in fact, we have a small shovel here that belonged to one of the men. And their mate, Macca, stayed on in the cottage after their demise.
So this is a 5-room building. It's pretty basic, but it's also pretty sophisticated for its time when you consider that getting access to any kind of building materials in the 1930s in Lightning Ridge was very difficult. There was certainly no hardware store just down the street back then. This is the layout of the house, and if we flip it around to a top-down view, we can see the 4 rooms with one of the back rooms split into 2 for the little ensuite bathroom.
You can see the adds to timber. You can see canvas remnants. She would have had dividing walls that were whitewashed. And they had a door in the bedroom. This was the master bedroom. You wonder, why would you have a door in the bedroom? But I like to say, well, he was an Englishman. And of course, everything perfect, 2 doors, 2 windows, little box house. So maybe that was for a breeze. I mean, it would have been a welcome breeze. And the windows all had the pop-out shutters, even though there was no glass. But comfortable it is. We're on a dirt floor. It would have been broom polished. We've put gravel down just, for housekeeping. But it was very handy if water came in, because when that ridge runs with water, it comes right into here, and it would have soaked in. So that was good. But if you look around, you can see an entrance over here behind one of the areas, and that was into the bathroom. So an ensuite back in 1932 was pretty special. One of the surprises in this cottage was finding this signature on the door, Sid Graham. He died, he was older than George, he died in 1969, and George died, I think it was 1975 or 76. Now the main door then was through this side into the living area. So as you can see, we've blocked the front door here, and we have used it as a display space. But it's very obvious on the floor, the concrete that would have led back into the kitchen. We have a few pussycat tracks in the concrete. Now, I don't know if that was the little boy Mal's putty cats or if it belonged to the Graham brothers, because in '37, when they settled into this place, they actually had quite a few cats, as we have pictured on the wall.
The living room is now used as a display space for various historical items in the Society's collection. Towards the rear of the building, behind the living room, is the kitchen. It's been modified over the years, but it has now largely been restored to its original configuration.
Now, when I came to town in 1990 and joined the Historical Society in '92, this was an open veranda. Somebody needed the corrugation, so they just helped themselves. Nobody lived here. Sure, our society was created to protect this cottage, and we kept it creosoted against the white ants, and there really was no furniture or anything in this. This is our collection of 25 years. But in the theme of recreating the cottage, we did put the veranda back as it was before into the 2 rooms, and made the push-out windows that are propped up. We made a barn door so that you could actually look out the back halfway, and it gave us more wall space to collect. And you can see that we've collected an awful lot of things. But this kitchen was a hive of activity for the Graham brothers.
He does the cooking and arguing.
Well, I get up and light the fire. I've got the wood in, and I cook the breakfast, eat mine, and then George might get up. Oh, he might be late, he might be tired.
I do the floor and the washing up. And the yard, that's got to be cleaned up once a week.
We used to have an old neighbour, she used to come and do it.
And another bedroom then, which is just off of the kitchen. And it's a space now that our friend Mal Spicer always cautiously pokes his head around the corner, who's sleeping in my bed today? Because remember, he slept in that room, and he had an entrance into the ensuite bathroom.
And that small bedroom is the last of the interior spaces in the cottage. On the exterior of the cottage, we can see one of the Graham Brothers cottage's most unusual features, the double chimney in the western corner.
And now we're looking at the chimneys. Remember, this was the fuel stove, and this was the fireplace. So we have the duo chimneys. And of course, using the Shell oil tins, a great recycle technique. The one story I really love about the Shell oil tins was back, I think it was 1947, one of the local lads came home with his bride, and she was the first lady manager of DJ's, and wondered what she'd struck out here in the bush managing his family store that was pretty basic, I can assure you. And she was incensed To think that the old geezers who died were just rolled up in a blanket and dropped in the cemetery. The cemetery had been surveyed. It was a nice space, but very sad and very unkept. And of course, no stones to mention. And she ordered timber coffins made down in Sydney. They'd be up soon on the lorry. And in the meantime, she engaged the local Mr. Fix-It, who was a little bit of a drongo up and down the street. But yes, he'd tap down a few coffins, he'd make them up, and yes, we could use them in the meantime. She had lots of those shell cartons out the back. And she heard all the thumping and ripping and going on, but she didn't see the coffin until she got to the cemetery. And lo and behold, there it sat, loaded with the victim going underground, and it said, "Hell, hell, hell, hell." Maybe he wasn't quite a drongo after all. He had a bit of fun making those coffins.
The land around the cottage also has its surprises, including the facilities down in the back corner. Long drop toilets, or toilets that are simply a very deep hole, a mine shaft, were pretty common back in the day, and they're still quite common now with off-grid living in mining camps on the opal fields around Lightning Ridge. A hole in the ground is actually a pretty elegant solution to a difficult and rather smelly problem. An outdoor toilet is generally referred to as a dunny, which comes from the 19th century English word dunniken, which itself is made up of the words dunna, or dung, and ken, which means house. So the dunniken is very literally the house. Also, a good dunny should always be stocked with reading material, which will be relevant in a few seconds.
The dunny down the back is another story. And one time I had a fellow rush in the door. This is, years ago, be over 20 years ago. He ran to the back window that was open like a barn door and looked out. He said, "Where's the library?" And I recognized him immediately as being American, and I thought, well, he can't even pronounce library. Didn't think much of that. But I said, "What do you mean, library?" He said, those Graham brothers, he said, "I came to visit back in early years, and there were 2 dunnies down the back. And everybody thought, what civilized men, they each have their own dunny." Aha, one was the entrance to the opal mine. No mining allowed in the town, but you can be sure where there's a will, there's a way.
So not only did the Graham brothers find a loophole to let them dig a mine shaft in an area that's no longer zoned for mining, but they also made their mine pretty darn secure, because who would want to go down a mine shaft that's disguised as a toilet? You'll never know what you'd find at the bottom of that one. So that is the Graham Brothers cottage in Marilla Street, Lightning Ridge. If you'd like to visit the cottage and see this awesome piece of Lightning Ridge and opal mining history, along with a spectacular collection of items from Lightning Ridge and local history, as well as the nurse's cottage in the backyard, you should stop by the museum in Marilla Street, Lightning Ridge.
And our society celebrates 40 years this year, 1982, created to look after this bit of property in the town and this cottage. And of course, 40 years, 2022. So it's a good time for us.
Now you get used to a place, and I like the bush. I always did like the bush. So that's the way it is. Some people like the cities, they can have them. I can't understand that.
This video was made with the help of the Lightning Ridge Historical Society at Lightning Ridge, with special thanks to Barbara for making this possible. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to Curiosity Mine on YouTube and following along on all of your favourite social media channels. The links are in the description. And thank you for watching.